Welcome to another episode of the CPGGUYS podcast. Our co-hosts, Shri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Shri and Peter.
Hey, welcome everyone to this episode of the CPGGUYS. And I'd love to remind all of you that you can find all our content on cpgguys.com. And while you're there, we'd love for you to rate and review us on the Apple CPG podcast at tinyurl.com/Apple CPG podcast. That easy. And by the way, we love those 5-star reviews, so keep them coming. I also want to remind all our audience that in the month of October, we did two special things. One was we had 8 female leaders featured as part of our Female Leaders Series month in October, as well as we ran a series on profitability, where we discussed everything from retail media to D2C, so how you partner with retailers, and the fact that at the end of the day, e-commerce is not dilutive to your P&L. Partnering with retailers, such as the one we're about to speak to today, is how business will grow in 2021. And so please do go back and take a look at that. And one last thing, we now have an Instagram series. One question, one answer every weekday in November. And Peter and I are going to extend that into December, right before the holidays as well. So every single day you can tune into Instagram, CPGGUYS, that's our handle at CPGGUYS, and listen into one question, one answer.
Plonk, you know what that is?
Tell me.
Dropping knowledge on people.
There you go. There you go. And in the meanwhile, I've also helped launch ZenFuel, a 100% natural supplements brand to help aid your sleep, energy, better movement, stress and anxiety relief, and male sexual wellness. Do check it out at www.zenfuel.com. That's ZenFuel.com, or simply search ZenFuel on Amazon, and we'll soon be at other retailers as well. ZenFuel, where your happiness is our ambition. And now, on to welcome the man himself, the legend of CRM, loyalty, data, analytics, consumer insights, customer insights, my friend and co-host, Mr. Bond.
Shri,
Shaken or stirred today?
always stirred, not shaken. I'm more of a Connery kind of man. May he rest in peace. You know, Shri, you're the duck fat to my French fries, the remoulade to my crab cake, the mango chutney to my samosa. It's always a pleasure. Glad we're here. And look at this, we're here together. Same physical space. We have an invisible piece of plexiglass between us. That's how we're practicing safe podcasting.
Or it might just be amazing Photoshop editing.
It could be Photoshop.
It could be that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I want to welcome a friend today to the show, one that I've known in the industry for quite some time. When we worked together, I was on the vendor side and he was on the retail side, and probably one of his earliest vendor partners in the business. Welcome to my friend and CEO of Box.com, Chieh Huang. Welcome to the show.
What's going on, everyone? It's great to see you again, Shri. Peter, thanks for having me.
Likewise. And for our audience, could you tell us what you do for Box and what Box does?
What do I do for Box? If you ask a lot of the employees in the office, whom none are here for obvious reasons, they would say I talk on the phone and I eat their samples. But overall, it's pretty accurate. But overall, I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Box.com.
And Boxed is?
A very interesting retailer, as you know, Sri, that started back in 2013, focused on being the online purveyor of bulk goods, mostly to a younger audience who we thought was going to look for CPG online. But since then, we've grown to so much more than that, to all lower 48 states, and hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue since then. So it's been a pretty wild ride.
He is humble. He says hundreds of dollars.
I've been shopping at Boxed for probably 3 or 4 years, so I'm quite familiar with them. So great to have you on board.
Humble man. And my humble recommendation to all our listeners, especially on the brand side, is if you already haven't engaged with Box.com and looking to build a partnership, hopefully after this episode, you are going to the Box.com website. You are getting in contact and seeing how y'all can partner and get your business going on Box.com.
Yep.
So let's jump into it, Chieh. Your career was born, if I remember, our first time we met, you talked about being in the legal field early. And then you passed through companies such as Astro Ape and Zynga. Ooh. How was Boxed born? Like, how do you go from legal to Astro Ape and Zynga?
Oh, interesting. So there's a lot to unpack there. So I started my professional career on after law school on September 15th, 2008, in Times Square, and that date may not mean a lot to some of the younger folks listening to this, but probably for all three of us here, we will remember that September 15th, 2008. That morning, I started my professional career about 10 hours after Lehman Brothers collapsed.
Wow.
So what a great day to start the rest of your life. And so I had a new suit, new briefcase, starting a new career right across the street from Lehman Brothers. So that was a really interesting time. But learned a lot as a I guess I'm doing air quotes, and I know you might not see this on video, but I'm doing air quotes right now because I was an attorney, but really I was a document jockey for about 2 years as a lowly kind of brand new corporate associate. But at that time, something called the iPhone came out, or just about came out. Like I remember the year before.
Yep.
So a few friends from high school reached out and said, we bought one of these things too, and these things was the iPhone 2G, if you remember, with the silver back. It was like $900, and
About this
um,
thick.
exactly, and I bought one too, and so we bonded over it. They said, let's make Facebook type games for this thing called the iPhone. It's not big now, but we think a lot of people will buy the iPhone. And we quit our jobs and did it. So got that thesis right. Social gaming, as you all know, became pretty big on Facebook and mobile. We were acquired by Zynga. Zynga then IPO'd, and we stayed about 2 years before we left and went on to a different thesis that was CPG online. So we got the right timing with mobile on gaming, and we thought we were right on the cusp of being on probably the early side of CPG on mobile, and went after a much bigger prize. And here we are 7.5 years later.
No kidding, Han. What a ride it's been.
Oh,
Chieh,
man.
thanks for joining us today. It's great to meet you and very excited to talk to you. You referenced this a little bit in the beginning of your intro and when Chieh asked you to talk a little bit about your business, but if you could go a little deeper into what you see as ultimately being the mission of Box.com, what consumer need is it really filling? And is it a club value ecosystem in particular?
Yeah, it's really interesting questions. So when we first started, I would say it was a lot more akin to, hey, we're trying to form an online club, which didn't exist at that moment. But what we found over time through quantitative and qualitative surveys, the most recent one was last week. I was watching this qualitative survey that we put together from people all over the country. And what you're finding is that the value proposition for our customers, which is frankly more important than what you're going to hear from me, is that we've become that stock up partner in their life. So bulk is important because there's value with it, but it doesn't have to be bulk for every single SKU. And that was one of the interesting things that we gleaned from the latest qualitative survey. What you also find is that we're a trusted source for these products. And so being operators, as yourselves, you know that, especially Chieh, on the other side of the table, like sometimes online, it's kind of like the Wild West. Like you join a marketplace, you might find someone else claiming to be an authorized seller of your brand on that marketplace, and you're just like, time out, okay? They don't ship my product via a dusting envelope from Hong Kong, okay? There's a really, and so I think what you found in these surveys is that I trust Box. I know it's coming from the manufacturer in one single order, and I trust them enough to feed my family with the items I buy there.
That's amazing, Chieh. So I want to jump to what's going on in this year that's well into the close of the year at this stage. Also known sometimes as the wild year of 2020. And obviously in 2020, one of the things that's changed in retail is the consumer dynamic of shifting large portions of their shopping across multi-categories to online, aka e-commerce. And where does Box.com fit in? Squarely in the middle of that. So I feel strongly that your business is probably going through the roof at this stage. And there's significant demand increase, which means it puts pressure on your supply chain and fulfillment. How have y'all adapted in 2020? I'm sure when you created your plans for 2020 versus where you are, it's like night and day. How did y'all adapt through the last 6, 8 odd months, and where are y'all today with looking forward to 2021?
Oh man, I just feel like, when we started in a garage 7.5 years ago, we believed that we would be successful and that this would be a thing in the future. I just never would have expected it being the thing or causing it to become the thing was a international pandemic. I never, but here we are, Sri, right? And what's also interesting about human behavior is now instead of panic buying, bread, milk, and eggs and bottled water, people tend to panic buy toilet paper. So there's a lot to unpack when all is said and done about 2020. But you're right, it's been a great tailwind for us overall. We have seen some headwinds in some of our B2B type businesses because, of course, like none of us are really actively going into the office. But overall, for the B2C business, I mean, no one could have planned it. Our reaction to it and trying to keep it in stock and keeping the kind of goods moving has been to be more flexible, even than how we used to be or how we normally are. Brands, for the folks listening to this, they all know like people started curtailing SKUs. It's like, hey, I can pump out more X product if I make less X UPCs. And so that's really what happened. And for us to be able to onboard new items and new formats quickly has been key to us being able to fulfill that demand.
Chieh, my background is in retail. I spent some time at Kroger's dunnhumby division, and then I'm the guy responsible for those 6-foot-long register receipts you get when you buy a can of soda at CVS. I'm sorry if you've ever had one of those. I apologize. But in both of those cases, there was always this concept of consumer value. So I'm really kind of curious as to what is Box.com's philosophy around value for the consumer?
Yeah, so when it comes to value, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I like to think, it's not even me saying it. In the latest quantitative survey, convenience is the number one reason why people shop Box. But convenience, it's table stakes these days to get something delivered. It's table stakes to get it delivered in 2 days or less. And also when it comes to price, it's also table stakes to be competitive and sharp on price, right? No one wants to be ripped off for a box of Oreo cookies. So I think when it comes to, that convenience aspect and how we go after it, it's really about the user experience and basket building. So your typical audience, you remember from Peter, from your Kroger and dunnhumby days, people don't go into a Kroger or any kind of CPG store and buy one item and leave. No one does that. But yet when you go online in general, those are the type of experiences that are built. And so for us, making sure a busy parent can come into an experience quickly and easily and build a basket of 10 items has been core to why people like us.
I know through the journey that Chieh and I have ridden together, whether it was early days at Frito-Lay and e-commerce for me and early days for Box for Chieh, or then subsequently on Johnson & Johnson. I know we had you come out to Johnson & Johnson and we did a Box day actually. And then again at Revlon, the partnerships started to begin before I left. But I've always known that being unboxed in the e-commerce world or in the retail world is almost an automatic for me. But let's say a brand wants to discover Boxed, wants to get in touch with Box, create a partnership. And do you have a rigid criteria for who you partner with? Is it like certain thresholds, a certain number of SKUs? Do you evaluate something like value for the consumer? Like our audience would love to know, especially if they're from a brand. How does a brand get onto Box.com?
So I think a bunch of different ways. It's probably the easiest way to explain how we evaluate SKUs and new SKUs. So in the beginning, it was just wide open, right? You're sitting in a garage, you have 0 SKUs, you're just onboarding anything you can get your hands on. But over time, once you start to fill good, better, best in every single category, I wouldn't necessarily say we're one in, one out at this point, but definitely there needs to be some compelling story that the actual buyer then has to bring to the buyer's table to convince everyone else of why one thing might get dropped and one thing might get added, if that makes sense. So, for the buyers, they do have meetings and they do have to defend the items they want to onboard. So it might be pretty extreme value. It might be, this is the hottest trend and this is pure white space, it's a no-brainer. Or it might be something simply as interesting as we don't have, in this category, we just have good and best, but there's no in-between kind of better. And so there's a variety of reasons why we onboard SKUs.
And Chieh, for the benefit of our listeners, is your merchandising team divided into subcategories? Do you have a chief merchandising officer running this for you? Like, if they want to engage, what's the best way for them to connect and start showcasing the brand, et cetera, to see if a partnership is relevant?
Yeah, so Ankit will kill me, but our chief, our head merchant who runs all of our private brand as well as branded merchants or merchandising, Ankit, yeah, either reaching out to him via LinkedIn or any one of our buyers directly. Generally, you should get a response. It will now strangle me for saying that because they're probably going to get a ton of LinkedIn requests. But we're always on the hunt for great products. So reach out.
We'll put his LinkedIn link embedded in the podcast episode, so people can get to him even easier.
Yeah, I was gonna give him or give you guys his personal cell phone number, but
that'd be good too.
I actually have it, Chieh, from back in the
really?
day.
Yeah.
And any relatives too. We need their numbers.
Text him anytime in the middle of the night. Go for it.
Now you're gonna hear it, Chieh. Zenfuel.
Let's go a little bit deeper on the brand relationship. What opportunities do brands have to highlight themselves on Boxed? There's a massive rise of retail media taking place across food and beverage retailers. So would really love to know what is available for brands to do that at Boxed.
That is a really interesting trend that not all retailers have the wherewithal to keep. So I think, online retail 1.0, especially in CPG, was like, I buy for $1, I try to sell for $2. But the reality is there's so many dollars that get invested into non-trackable marketing channels that being at that completely trackable and being at that moment of truth and moment of conversion is really valuable to brands. And so to be able to tell them, if you invest this dollars, I can drive this many sales and here's the proof, is really powerful. And so we've been doing that for almost 2 years now. So we have our own programmatic ad platform where you can kind of get top placement in any category. Search, of course, is sponsorable. And then there's also kind of the top bricks that are rotating every week. So there's a variety of ways.
SEM.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I like to say that selling cookies online can be a decent business. Selling ads for cookies online is a much better business. And then lastly, selling software that sells the ads, that sells the cookies online is probably the best business. And so we're just eating our way up the food chain.
From your experience in seeing how brands are investing against that, particularly against search and brand equity, are you increasingly seeing the actual brands investing in that versus, say, the sales organization that calls on you?
Very, very good graduate level question, because that's also a lot of what a lot of folks don't realize is that
Hey, we're just the CPG guys. How would we?
What do we know? What do we know?
You know the game. What I think the smoking gun for us in that the answer is yes to that, Peter, is that we are starting to see more and more agencies manage that spend. And if you're a sales team like Chieh, back in your days, you're not going to hire an agency to manage your trade spend or your sales, right? Like that's basically your job, right? So and so for us, that is the proof that some of the brand spend is coming into this channel. I don't think it's going to totally take over TV and billboards, because at the end of the day, you still need top of the funnel advertising as well. But really having a balance of non-trackable brand building and actually trackable like bottom funnel ads, I think will be the balance of the future.
Speaking of which, let's say a brand has now gotten a relationship with Box.com, they've gotten listed, they want to get into the partnership of retail media, as you've just described for us pretty eloquently over here. Let's talk about content and listings on Box.com. Do y'all obsess over the digital shelf, which is the quality of the images, brand videos? The industry lovingly now has terms such as above the fold, below the fold content, the quality of the bullet points. Do they need to be SEO ready? Like, who at Boxed is responsible for ensuring that the merchandising quality is top notch when it comes to the actual product detail page? And then do you all partner closely with brands? Are you doing a lot of the photography for brands yourself? Like, what's going on internally?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is normal, but both the merchants as well as the ops team is responsible for that data. The merchants, because they want the conversion rate to be high. So if it's a kosher product, they want that to, you want that on the site. If it's a low calorie product, you want that accurately reflected. Or even something as simple as, hey, there's an ingredient update, so the allergens change. We sure as heck better make sure that we change that. But the ops team is also really focused on it because remember, most of our items are shipped first party from our fulfillment center. So we need to know the weight, we need to know the dimension size so that we know what box we're going to use before you even check out. And also on the way out, we need to remeasure not only from the scan, but also from the weight to make sure your order is accurate. And so if that is wrong, like by a pound or two, on a single product, let's just say we're moving 1,000 of those items a day. That's 1,000 boxes getting kicked into the error a day, into what we call the hospital lane a day.
Yep.
And so you can't have that. And that's why the ops team will double check the dimensions and the weights as well.
Do you have a personal favorite between images, video, the bullet points, the title? Is there any one area that you think is an absolute cannot make a mistake at all under any circumstance?
From our site, so I can only speak from experience on Box, the vast majority of add to carts happen not in the PDP, in the product description page, but actually the gallery. And so
listing page. Yep.
Yeah, they're scrolling, they're coming through the app and they're just adding to the gallery. So the gallery picture is most important.
That's the first image, correct?
That is
when you're on the listing page and they're displaying
the full carousel.
It's the hero image.
The hero image.
The hero image is what matters. Yeah, Chieh, the data I've seen says that in grocery, somewhere between 50 and 75% of basket ads is happening on the listing page.
Yeah, so for us too, you'll see as if we were walking through the fulfillment center, or you could see with some of our newest private brand products, it's the reason why, we have this big word, like the paper towels. It says paper towels. And you're like, why the hell are you wasting the space calling it paper towel? Everyone knows what the hell it is, right? It's not a napkin in a roll, But the reason is, if you don't know our brand too well and just scrolling through, you need to know exactly what's in that box. And so if they don't know it's like fruit snacks, they're not gonna look into the PDP. And so having that bigger on the box is another little thing that we found that drives higher conversion rates, at least on our site.
Let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. It's pretty hard to avoid. It's had a significant impact upon the supply chain for your national brand manufacturers. I have to imagine for your private label manufacturers. So how did you, in any particularly special way, manage consumer expectations with respect to out of stocks, and how did you engage with your consumers, how did you keep your consumers engaged with Box when they might not have been able to source a lot of the products that they'd previously been getting from you?
That's been a difficult decision that we made earlier in the year, that who knows, this will be one of the chapters in the book of Box over time, if there's ever a book written about this. We made the decision because there was so much traffic and so many folks coming to Box organically, that we didn't go into overdrive, in the sense that we had all the customers that we wanted and we were happy with. Our thinking was, let's service those customers well so that they will be stickier over time. So instead of having this massive spike that actually reverts back to the mean, because people just said, I've used it once, but the box came in 2 weeks, half the stuff wasn't in stock. That was the kind of trade-off that we made. And so the customers that we did bring into the funnel got really good service throughout the pandemic and continues to this day. We just didn't go out and just really kind of put more on our plate than we could really handle. So controversial decision, yes, of course, because you could also make the argument that that's your moment, go out and try to get every American to try Box. But our thinking is that if you do that and 90% of them have a suboptimal experience, I don't think that's long-term thinking. And so we made the opposite decision.
So Chieh, I know back in the days when we again started partnering, this is like the Frito-Lay days, right? When we used to talk assortment and getting onboarded with Box, we'd really talk to existing SKUs, but larger club-like value, but very similar SKUs, not necessarily exclusive, more just like what was available in the club channel. How's that evolved today? Like, are you taking on exclusive assortment from brands that are only sold on box.com? Like, what's your philosophy there? And then when a brand comes on board, what are the metrics that matter? Is it purely just hurdle rates of dollar sales for Box that matters? Is it value to the consumer? It's obviously, I'll take profitability out of the equation because it's an obvious one. But what matters at the end of the day? Like you talked about basket building, cart building, 10 items in the cart, very convenient, fast. Like, what are those metrics? And then do you have exclusive assortment?
So before we even go there, the reason I was smiling the entire time you were asking that question was because I remember one of my first trips to meet with Frito-Lay, and I was pretty new to the industry, and I remember asking like, what, like, why is there so much air in these bags, and there's not many. This is just it's such a new.
Oh, just go to Denver. Go to
Nitrogen
Denver.
flush.
Yeah, and then, but it's so hilarious because I remember, I won't name the executive that actually answered, let me tell you why our chips taste great. And I was like, okay, that does not answer why there's so much air in the bag, but it was so interesting. And to this day, I remember that meeting. But to your question, not to punt on the actual answer, yes, we do have exclusive assortment. For the folks listening on the line, I think the brands that have used Box as a test and learn platform have been the most successful in the long run with us. Because the brands that have expected us to drive from day one Costco-like sales, you're setting yourself for disappointment. No one online is driving Costco-like sales in store. No one, including Amazon. And so the folks that are getting extreme value out of partnering with us are the folks that may be giving us exclusive assortment, but testing that exclusive assortment. And I'm just not even saying which one out of my portfolio will do better, but I'm saying, hey, what if I do a lower cost box with less colors printed, bigger UPC, so it's easier for the automation, for the online channel in general. But Box, can we test with you guys exclusively maybe for 90 or 180 days and share that data with us? And that way we can get better across our entire portfolio. And that way we have win-win. So from our standpoint, we get 90 to 180 days of an exclusive item. The brand gets the knowledge, and over the long run, they know like what colors, like how pretty the box needs to be on a digital shelf or versus a fulfillment center shelf.
Partnership, so a brand gets 1P data. Wow, that gets them excited.
Doesn't exist in the industry. So
it's hard to find. Congrats. Yeah, bravo.
And then we also, the second part of that, Chieh, was the metrics that matter.
That's right. The metrics that matter for most brands, of course, sales. At the end of the day, if you're moving 10 units a day, it's like, okay, what are we doing here? So definitely sales to get them interested. I've also found that in their placements or their paid placements, what type of ROI are they seeing? Because if they're seeing good ROI, then the thinking is if I continue to double down, then I can see the sales on the other end. Because I see a channel that's working for me. I think those have been two very important metrics that brands have really looked for.
Final question. You mentioned your customer base. What are your primary sources or tactics to generate new customers for Box.com?
Oh, it's so interesting because, like I said before, we were just doing this qual survey, and in the interviews, like folks like say, oh, my neighbors, I learned about it from my neighbors. I see this big box and I saw like 3 houses with it out on the recycling kind of day. And like, I was like, am I the only idiot not using this thing? What is this? And I Googled it. But then we also heard from someone that said, neighbors, I don't have neighbors. I have cornfields as neighbors. So, it's not easy. I have to drive. I think the exact quote was, I think 75 minutes to a local warehouse club. And so I was sure that this was happening online. So that's how I found you guys. So of course, the box and general awareness driving items like that help. Word of mouth obviously helps. And then also a bunch of marketing as well. So, traditional SEM, SEO, paid social as well. So all those channels we mix.
Well, I'll compliment you on the first thing you mentioned, which is the branding on your shipping devices, very obvious. It's almost up there with the old gateway computers that came in the cow boxes. You're right up there, so bravo.
We had this big debate because it costs money, and every penny counts in this industry.
Yep.
I'm glad you said that because most people here don't get it when I say the gateway effect.
Oh, yeah.
Because my first computer, I wanted a gateway because I saw a big cow box in front of my neighbor's house. I want that,
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that.
So no, thank you. I felt like I was the only person that remembered that effect.
I'm old. That's why I'm just old.
Can I say one last thing to everyone there or listening? I often get chided for having my face on some of the boxes. I want everyone to know that was not my decision. And actually, because people think I have a gigantic ego if I'm putting my own face on these boxes. Every artist gets to take a box size and put their own art on it as a way to, just be an artist. And hey, my art is going to millions of households around the world, around the country. One didn't even like the exercise and said, you know what, just as a big FU to Chieh, I'm going to put his face on the box, knowing that he'll veto it. I vetoed it, but they printed millions of them anyway, and they knew that I was cheap enough to not throw the boxes away, and that's why there's a face there.
How would we know, Chieh?
Who would put their faces on a company logo? Seriously, talk about narcissism.
I wonder who those people are.
I don't know who these people are.
But Chieh, I wanted to ask you that question, and I said I'm not going to ask you that question on a podcast, and here he brings it up.
There you go.
So, but you know what's amazing, Peter?
What?
When you have a friend on the show and someone you've known for a while in the industry, time just flies. And here we are as we wrap up this episode.
Yeah.
I want to remind all our listeners again, you can find all our content on cpgguys.com. While you're there, do check out our Apple podcast on tinyurl.com/Apple CPG podcast. A reminder that in the month of October, we ran a profit series with 5 episodes, ranging all the way from D2C to retail media to supply chain econometrics of e-commerce. And we also left you with a pro forma P&L, which you can compare against your national P&L, where we assure you, based on our own learnings, that getting into the business of e-commerce can be totally run with no profit dilution whatsoever, depending on what you seek at the end of the day.
Yep.
And that said, Peter, I want to thank you for, as always, being my co-host and going through these with me.
This was fun. My God, I got to talk about Gateway. I got to totally geek out today. This is awesome stuff.
And
thank
Chieh, as a friend, and you're always welcome back on the show. Hopefully we'll have you back later, once we get through the holidays and see how 2020 went, to do a recap. But for our audience, could you remind folks where they can find box.com, and if they're looking for a partnership, where they should go?
Yeah, so on the website, at the bottom of the site, you'll be able to see kind of item suggestions or reach out to the buying team. If you can't find that button, then on LinkedIn, our buying team is pretty easy to find and rather responsive. Worst case, we'll print Ankit's personal cell phone number for everyone here, and just pull
home address too. Home address.
He's gonna listen to this and kill me, but in all honesty, like, even if it is just reaching out directly to me on LinkedIn, I'm rather responsive, and I'll loop the team in.
Ankit, don't sweat, man. We're just kidding.
Maybe.
Maybe. All right. It's a wild year. It's a maybe.
Yeah.
But folks, that's a wrap for this show. Chieh, we cannot thank you enough for making time for us today and coming on the CPG Guys. We hope to have you back soon to perhaps do a 2020 recap. Until then, folks, thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Sri.
Thank you, Chieh.
Thanks, Chieh.
We will see you soon next week.
Bye-bye.